strongly have a professional identity, when those three things come together, it's a storm. And it happens all the time. I now see it. It happens all the time. And the answer to this for recovery seems every single time to realize that this happens and talk about it. It is that enduring the Inquisition, being able to talk about it and get all those questions out that you're afraid of the answer.
Talk about moral injury, if you would. That's a newer phrase that popped on my radar just a couple of weeks ago. Somebody sent me an article about something, and then in the article had a link, a hyperlink to the moral injury, and I was like, "What is that?" And it was only about 18 months old. As I understand it, moral injury is when you work in a profession, you have your personal ethics and morals, you have your professional ethics and morals, and then the job is asking you to violate those based on some gray area that in my estimation, it typically happens in corporate healthcare settings where maybe you just need to discharge the person a little sooner than you want to because of some liability reason, but it's not ethically the right thing to do. Or maybe you hang on to them in care a little bit longer than you want to because we gotta pad the bottom line. Is that your understanding, that phraseology, or do you have a different interpretation or definition of moral injury?
No, that works. That works for me. And I think it's come up a lot over the last few years regarding burnout being moral injury.
Correct.
Some of that is with the length of stay and billing process. For me, one of the things that's looked at is the length of stay a patient has in the emergency department. And somehow that got equated to quality of care. It's something that can be benchmarked with the computer on how long the person was there, which is an easy way. But I can promise you, I can walk in with discharge papers and say, you don't need to be here, that's just a cold, without even seeing them, and tell them to leave, and they're only there 10 minutes. Whereas if I spend a lot longer with the person, whether it's a cold or they end up having leukemia, my care being longer somehow is equated with poorer care.
Really, longer equals poorer in the corporate pantheon of legal speak, or like you should be doing it faster?
Judging one person against another, judging one institution against another. If you go out on look at the metrics of hospital to hospital, length of stay is one of the things that is posted out there. So over time, that has come to be having faster care, being able to get in and out must be better. Whether that's true or not, that is the way it's interpreted in all those websites out there. And so if me as an ER physician wants to spend a little time and thinks, this story just doesn't seem right, I want to do a CAT scan, but it's going to add another 90 minutes to my length of stay on this person. Well, they could go to their primary care doc, and their primary care doc could order it. It is COVID, and all the things that are closed, and it's going to be a lot longer, but it's really not needed now. So should I go with the lower length of stay? Or because I have a concern, should I increase my length of stay and maybe help the patient out?
That sounds like it's driven by insurance not wanting to pay out.
There's a million things. COVID right now has a lot of different things. So there is not enough PPE in the world to handle the number of masks that we would have needed to do things now in COVID as I would have done a year ago. I do not think in 2019 I ever used an N95 mask. Mm-hmm. But if I did, every interaction, every in and out of that room, I would have used a different mask if I had somebody coming with active TB. So I used 0 last year. If I did this now in that setting, I would use dozens in a shift. We don't have enough to do that.
Right.
Now, because there's not enough, people are being asked to use the same mask or 5 days or 1 day or 30 days. We haven't figured this out, but there is not enough PPE in the world to do this. And if we use it the way we have to now, we are putting ourselves and our families at risk.
There's your moral injury.
If you have a patient come in and is in cardiac arrest and they don't have a heart rhythm, do you call that then? Do you intubate the person? Because if you intubate a person and their likelihood is that their high likelihood is that they're not going to make it, coming in an asystole, no heartbeat, and then they find out that they were COVID, you've just put yourself and potentially everybody else in the room, if you were bagging the patient, especially before viral filters, and aerosolizing COVID all over the room. Maybe you were okay, but your 70-year-old nurse who's been doing this a long time, what if she gets it? What if she ends up in your hospital and she dies? Was it your patient that you chose to intubate that probably wasn't going to make it anyway?
Right.
And we don't know, because we don't know enough about COVID to know yet.
Right. So that's another moral injury. Yeah. It's becoming clearer. I appreciate that. I think I had only conceptualized it in the form of like company pressures to do certain things, but it's also it's really any ethical conflict that I guess is juxtaposed against long-standing orthodoxy. So you get told something, this is the way we do things, and then rules change, but you don't necessarily know why or how. And then you're forced to choose, and both of them seem like an equally poor option. In my world, we call that a double bind. You go through a series of double binds throughout childhood, maybe in a chaotic household where parents are inconsistent, something like that, or they're just highly invalidating. You end up with mental illness in children, largely. Now we're doing it to our professionals. We're putting them in perpetual double binds, or at least repeated double binds, where neither outcome is good. And they're suffering. And they're suffering in a way that apparently, from what I'm hearing now, they're not allowed to talk about, because if they talk about it, it puts their license at risk because they're deemed to be crazy and unfit to work, which is, how do you get out of that?
You're right. Exactly. That is the sort of stew that we're in. So I reached, in the early parts of 2000, a time where I was at the sink at my hospital with the insulin and with a needle that I wasn't going to take the bottle because then it would be missing. I wanted to take a syringe of this with me. And I had not gotten to the decision of actually putting the needle through the plunger and withdrawing the fluid. I had done many steps before that. I was at the point, like, if I'm at this point, then we're not going to do any more decisions. This is torture. This is the one. And I was trying to make the decision, is it this one or not? And if it's not, then it's not. We're done with playing this game. And so as I stood there and thought about it, I decided that, my daughter had been getting better, not a lot better, but it seemed pretty clear that at that time she was going to make it through. Her vision had come back. It was cortical blindness, so a lot of it was the swelling of the brain resolving. Cortical blindness is that your eyes see, but your brain doesn't know it. And so the eyes are fine. There was nothing wrong with her eyes. She just needed to recover that part of her brain that was swollen.
Fascinating.
And she had started to talk again. It wasn't quite right, but she could communicate. She was able to ride a tricycle. And so it was getting better. It wasn't what it was as a normal 5-year-old, but it certainly wasn't worse than a newborn where she couldn't even cry. So I decided that it would be never. But then how do you reconcile all this pain? And what I decided, apparently I'm not unique at this, Buckminster Fuller had a child who died at the age of, I think, 4, had a similar process, was, well, I'm just going to consider myself dead. That there will be no dreams, no passions, no hopes, no desires. You get up, you try to do good for the world, you take care of your family, and you try to shove everything, every emotion down. It actually works really well in emergency medicine. So I wouldn't know if I was hungry. I wouldn't know what I wanted to eat. I wouldn't necessarily know if I had to go to the bathroom. I tried to, every emotion, every biological need, as much as I could, I tried to shut down. And it's not great, but it worked.
Kept you alive.
You know, it kept, I had things to do. I had lots of rehab, speech and PT and OT to do with her. And I had to figure out schooling. And I had to work and do CMEs. I had a lot of stuff to do. And if you took out all the emotional part, it was easier. You had enough energy to do the doing part. And I stayed that way for 16 years.
And then what?
And then
16 years is a long time, by the way, to stuff down emotion and be a robot.
Apparently, because it doesn't go away.
That's true. That's true.
The next 2 years, I spent lots of time in tears. It all came out. So what happened was, I had told you I belonged to this group called Council of Residency Directors. And on January 11th, one of the people wrote a email to our listserv, over 2,000 people. And by that time, I had been on listservs for pediatric brain tumors, and I understood how difficult it was for people to write about their children and these difficult things with their marriage and their family. It usually takes a long time. And he wrote this open letter, this program director, that one of his residents had killed himself over a sick family member, and how he didn't see it coming, and he felt guilty that it happened on his watch, and that we had to shine a light on this and speak its name and create a legacy. And as I read this letter, my first thought was, you're a program director. I would never, ever, ever talk to you. In fact, I would use every ounce of energy that I had to pass for you, because you just had too much control over my life. And no matter how much you wanted to help me and offered resources, it just seems so scary. The culture of saying, yeah, I'm in need, I am the weak link today, just doesn't happen. And we don't have role models of how to do it. You don't be the one that is not to be counted on. So I was like, geez, Chris Doty is maybe his story's out there too. I couldn't fathom why he would think that he was guilty of this in some way. And not only that, it had nothing to do with the job. It was a family member. Clearly, my job 16 years before could not handle it either. And that was random people working with me in the emergency department, not somebody that had all the power over whether I would have a job or not. So then he called that we needed to do something about this. When I got to the end of the letter, I realized that we don't speak about it. And this really well-known program director in emergency medicine, this really good man, had gotten hurt because we don't talk. We don't make it safe to talk, and we don't make it safe for me, somebody like me, to say the story. And the only way that this can get better